It's just before sunrise in Aigai, the capital city of ancient Macedon. In the royal open-air theatre, there's not an empty seat in the house. Thousands of people from far and wide are chattering in hushed excitement as they await the public opening of today's games. Among them are Macedonian aristocracy and military elite, ambassadors from famous Greek city-states like Athens and Thebes, and ordinary people and children. Everyone's dressed to the nines, wearing brightly coloured tunics pinned at the shoulder with ornate brooches, their heads crowned with festive wreaths of olive, laurel and ivy. They're gathered to celebrate the marriage of the Macedonian princess Cleopatra. No, not that Cleopatra. To her mother's brother, King Alexander I of Epirus. You know what they say, keep it in the family. Yesterday, the Greek ambassadors presented their host, King Philip II of Macedon, Cleopatra's father, with golden crowns and oaths of loyalty, assuring him that if anyone ever plots against him, they'll have his back. There was free-flowing wine, theatre, athletics, and a lavish banquet. Doesn't sound like a bad time at all, does it? The day finished with a concert from the famous singer Neoptolemus, the Bad Bunny of his day, who had everyone rocking out to a pop song featuring these catchy and prophetic lyrics. There is a man who'll catch the swift, creeping along a dark road. Suddenly he attacks unseen, stripping away the greatest hopes. Death, the source of mortals' many woes, strikes suddenly from nowhere. I know what you're thinking. Let's start a TikTok trend. Everyone, Philip included, is delighted with the message. Clearly, these words foretell the imminent downfall of Philip's nemesis, the Persian king. Or do they? Today, the crowd are looking forward to more of the same. For the grand finale, they're all gathered on the polished wooden benches surrounding the theatre's central arena, waiting for the man of the moment to make his dramatic entrance. And they won't be disappointed. Look now, here comes a ceremonial procession of priests, chanting hymns as musicians play along on their pipes and lyres. The crowd excitedly crane their necks to get a better look. Children are lifted onto shoulders, and a reverential hush spreads across the theatre. Along with lavish display of every sort, Philip included in the procession statues of the 12 gods, wrought with great artistry and adorned with a dazzling show of wealth to strike awe in the beholder. First is bearded Zeus, king of the gods, a crown of gilded oak leaves atop his head, and his famous thunderbolt in his right hand. Following closely behind is Zeus's wife, Hera, queen of the gods, whose long, regal dress is adorned with beautiful painted peacocks. Gradually, all 12 of the Olympian gods make their appearance, decorated in ways that instantly reveal their identity to the ancient onlookers. And along with these was carried a 13th statue, suitable for a god, that of Philip himself, so that the king exhibited himself enthroned among the 12 gods. What? Doesn't Philip know that 13's an unlucky number? So too, positioning himself among the gods? Isn't that asking for trouble? Well, like father, like son, I guess. At long last, the spotlight shines on the mighty King Philip in person, a pure white cloak flapping in the breeze, his hands on his hips, Superman style. The crowd raise their voices in praise of the mighty king, shouting his name in excitement. The early morning light bounces off Philip's worldly worn face, revealing a beard bushy enough to rival Graham McTavish. There's a jagged scar where his right eye used to be, lost to an arrow at the siege of Methone 18 years earlier. And he walks with a characteristic limp, from taking a spear to the leg in a clash with the Tribali 3 years prior. These life-changing injuries are a result of Philip's willingness to risk his own safety time and again while leading his men into battle, and his son will soon follow his lead. Ever the master of drama, Philip's chosen to show up unarmed, and he's instructed his 7 bodyguards, as well as his son Alexander and his new son-in-law Alexander, to hang back while he approaches the crowd alone. It's a display of vulnerability designed to show confidence that there's nothing but goodwill towards him in this crowd. But what's this? Suddenly one of Philip's bodyguards leaps from the shadows and plunges a dagger deep between the king's ribs. What? It's Pausanias, the king's former lover. Before anyone knows what's happened, Pausanias dashes out of the arena towards the getaway horses awaiting him outside. But why does he have 2 horses? Is there an accomplice? Immediately, one group of bodyguards hurried to the king, while the rest poured out in pursuit of the assassin. Having a head start, Pausanias would have mounted his horse before they could catch him had he not caught his boot in a vine and fallen. As he was scrambling to his feet, Perdiccas and the rest came up and killed him with their javelins. Ah, that's a shame. Now we'll never get to ask him if anyone put him up to it. Back in the theatre, in front of his adoring but now panicked and confused crowd, Philip's cloak quickly turns from bright white to deep crimson as it soaks through with the king's blood. King Philip II of Macedon is dead. You're listening to the Alexander the Great podcast, Season 1, Empire on Fire. I'm Dr. Faye Edwards, and this is Episode 1, Death Strikes Suddenly from Nowhere. It's the year 336 BCE, and Philip II, father of Alexander the soon-to-be-great, has transformed ancient Macedon from an unthreatening and unstable little backwater into a superpower that gives the Greeks the willies. When Philip took over as king 23 years ago, the Macedonian army had 10,000 infantry and 600 cavalry. That's roughly twice the capacity of the Royal Albert Hall. This force was constantly being outdone by their neighbours. By the time of his death, Philip's expanded the army to a whopping 24,000 infantry and over 3,000 cavalry. That's roughly 5 times the capacity of the Royal Albert Hall. Impressive. But not only that, this vast army has been rigorously trained and drilled into a formidable force that has subdued most of the famous Greek city-states, including Athens and Thebes. And they are not best pleased at having to bend the knee to a Macedonian ruler. Remember this, as it's coming back to haunt us in Episode 2. Philip's military superiority means that he's now been declared hegemon, or leader, of the League of Corinth. This is a bit like an ancient EU, wherein the Greek city-states who are members control their own internal affairs, don't attack each other, a biggie as up till now this is their favourite pastime, and instead join forces to wage wars against others under Macedonian leadership. The League is soon to be supporting the Persian invasion that Philip's got his one good eye on. It's because of Philip's position as hegemon that guests at Cleopatra's wedding come from all over Greece. It's also why he feels confident going before everyone unprotected. What a big mistake that was. Because for all his excellent judgment in empire expansion, Philip has made grave errors in his human relationships. You see, Pausanias, his assassin, is also his scorned ex-lover, and it's this beef that gets Philip killed. Pausanias was a bodyguard of the king and was beloved by him because of his beauty. When he saw that the king was becoming enamoured of another Pausanias, a man of the same name as himself, he addressed him with abusive words, saying he was a man-woman who was overly keen to accept the erotic attention of whoever was willing to give it. In this passage, Diodorus tells us that Philip's assassin was originally his male lover. The language he uses suggests a specific type of same-sex relationship called pederasty. To get into the weeds on this, listen to episode 1.2 with expert Dr. Andrew Lear. The argument between the two Pausaniases is reported by several ancient sources, so it really does seem to have happened. But how exactly the story unfolds after that is murky. One tradition, preserved by Diodorus, says that Pausanias the recently dumped teases Pausanias the newly acquired, saying, "You're not a real man. Look how quickly you jumped into bed with the king. That's not how real men behave." To prove his accuser wrong, the new lover does the most manly thing he can think of. He gets himself killed in battle, bravely defending Philip. But, Diodorus tells us, the now dead lover has friends in high places. In particular, he's friends with a powerful, and let's face it, pretty evil, Macedonian general called Attalus. And Attalus wants to avenge his friend's untimely, but very manly, death. So, sometime later, Attalus invites an unsuspecting Pausanias to a party, gets him drunk, and subjects him to a horrific night of beatings and gang rapings by his slaves. Bit harsh? Another tradition, preserved by Plutarch and Justin, misses out the manly death stuff. Instead, the way they tell it, the original Pausanias simply goes whinging to Attalus about how he's been disregarded by Philip for another lover, and Attalus lets his slaves gang rape him out of annoyance. The fallout is the same. Beaten, bruised and dishonoured, Pausanias begs his king, Philip, to give him justice against Attalus. "Ah," says Philip, "that's going to be tricky. You see, he's my new father-in-law. Tell you what, how about you become my bodyguard and I'll send Attalus away on campaign? Deal?" Pausanias is expected to be happy with his new bodyguard to the king position, which, in fairness, is quite a step up from scorned ex-lover. But spoiler alert, he's not happy, and if he had been, Alexander might never have become the Great, and we might be talking about Philip the Great instead. What a shame that would be. It's about a year before his assassination, and the 46-year-old Philip is about to hammer the nail firmly into his own coffin. You see, he's become enraptured by a teenage noblewoman at court, and he's chosen to make her his 7th wife. Her name is Cleopatra. No, again, not that Cleopatra. And she's the niece of his trusted general Attalus. Yes, the gang rapist we met a moment ago. Alexander is at the tender age of 19, and he's the king's official designated heir. He's received an elite Greek education from Aristotle, the leading intellectual of his day, which means he speaks fluent Attic Greek, worships the Olympian gods, and knows his Homer backwards. Alexander's also proven himself a capable leader. When he was just 16, he was left to rule as regent while Philip was away on campaign. Thinking they saw an opportunity to capitalise on Philip's absence, a Thracian tribe revolted. In response, Alexander led an army against them, crushed the uprising, captured their city, and expelled the inhabitants. I don't know about you, but when I was 16, I could barely tie my own shoelaces. He then repopulated the city with Macedonians and renamed it Alexandropolis, a foreshadow of things to come. Not only this, but at the age of 18, Alexander commanded the elite royal cavalry at the Battle of Chaeronea, fighting alongside his father. Ancient sources tell us it was Alexander who led the decisive charge that destroyed the first-class fighting force known as the Sacred Band of Thebes to secure a crushing Macedonian victory over the Greeks. By the time I was 18, I'd got the hang of the shoelaces, but I was still struggling to parallel park. Alexander has surely shown he's special here. But when Philip decides to marry this new bird, Cleopatra, it raises the hackles on Alexander's neck, for she is the only one of Philip's wives to be fully Macedonian. Alexander's own mother, Philip's 4th wife, Olympias, is a princess from the neighbouring kingdom of Epirus, making Alexander only half Macedonian. In a time when most folk are more xenophobic than the Trump administration, a son from Cleopatra could put a real spanner in the works for Alexander. But Philip, our sources tell us, is in love. At the wedding banquet, the wine is flowing, the crowd is merry, and a pompous Attalus is throwing his weight around. Feeling invulnerable in his new position as father-in-law to the king, he raises a toast to the newlyweds. Attalus called upon the Macedonians to ask of the gods that from Philip and Cleopatra there might be born a legitimate successor to the kingdom. At this, Alexander was exasperated. He sat right there. And shouted, "What about me, bonehead? Are you calling me a bastard?" And threw his cup at Attalus. So, what do you think happened? Did Philip back his son and heir, the young man who's demonstrated his prowess in battle and been raised from birth to be the next in line for the throne? Not on your Nelly. Philip rose up against Alexander with his sword drawn, but fortunately for both, his anger and his wine made him trip and fall. In response to which, Alexander mockingly said, "This man is the man who's preparing to cross from Europe into Asia, and he's tripped up crossing from one couch to another." That's some sharp wit right there. Alexander and Olympias immediately go into exile, fleeing to her hometown, ruled by her brother, Alexander I of Epirus. Does that ring any bells? Yes, he's the one who's marrying Philip's daughter at the start of this episode. Indeed, that marriage may have been Philip's way to decapitate any resistance from Olympias' brother by bringing him closer into the fold. Within a few months, tempers have cooled and Philip recalls Alexander to Macedon. But he never gives Attalus a telling off for implying that Alexander is illegitimate, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't say sorry for trying to kill Alexander either. So, bad blood remains. And the drama doesn't stop there, because while he's still at odds with his dad, Alexander gets wind of a plan to marry his elder half-brother, Diodorus, to the daughter of Pixodarus, ruler of Caria in modern-day Turkey. Pixodarus is answerable to the Persian king, and he wants a marriage alliance with Macedon to help him cast off Persian rule. Convinced his father is up to no good and making plans for a future without him in it, Alexander tries to take over this marriage pact for himself. He sends his good friend Thessalus, an actor with ancient fame equal to that of Adam Driver, over to Pixodarus to offer his hand in marriage instead. Pixodarus can't believe his luck. Not only does he get to meet Adam Driver, but Alexander is a significant upgrade. He accepts without hesitation. What the phalanx? Philip can hardly believe what Alexander's done now. He was purposefully not offering up his best son to Pixodarus. Alexander can do better. Because, while Diodorus is older than Alexander, his mother is not royal, and he has learning disabilities. And because the Macedonian throne does not pass down via strict primogeniture, that is, where the firstborn male inherits the throne no matter what, these setbacks mean he's never going to play a significant political role. Put another way, Diodorus is like a bunch of daffodils, while Alexander is a £300 bouquet. Philip went to Alexander's chamber and upbraided his son severely, and bitterly reviled him as ignoble and unworthy of his high estate, in that he desired to become the son-in-law of a man who was slave to a barbarian king. Negotiations with Pixodarus are abandoned, and Philip exiles 4 of Alexander's closest friends as punishment. These include Ptolemy and Nearchus, both of whom will go on to record eyewitness accounts of Alexander's reign. Ptolemy will also found the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt after Alexander's death. Note that Cleopatra, yes, that Cleopatra, is the last monarch of this dynasty and a great-granddaughter of Ptolemy. This is all to say that the relationship between father and son was strained in the run-up to Philip's death, Which brings us to our next question. Did Alexander have anything to do with it? Our ancient sources are very clear that Pausanias stabbed Philip because of his personal beef with him. But they also suggest powerful players may have been working with the assassin behind the scenes. Why? First, there were 2 getaway horses. Why did he need 2 if he was working alone? Second, he was speared to death instantly instead of being captured alive. Were the bodyguards keeping him from revealing a wider plot? Third, why would Pausanias kill the king in public with everyone watching? Couldn't he, as a trusted bodyguard, have snuck in on the king under cover of darkness? Why the spectacle? Is some powerful puppeteer making a point? The suspect list for who else might have been involved in the assassination is as long as Inspector Gadget's arm. For an expert opinion on what really happened, check out episode 1.3, where I discuss the matter in detail with Professor Ian Worthington. For now, here are a few contenders with real skin in the game. First up, the Lyncestians. These are 3 brothers from an Upper Macedonian noble family with a rival claim to the throne. Did they egg Pausanias on in his murderous intent towards Philip so they could seize control of Macedon for themselves? Alexander either thinks they did or wants us to think they did, for he immediately puts 2 of the brothers, Hieromenes and Arrhabaeus, on trial for being involved, and once found guilty, he slits their throats next to Philip's funeral pyre. This is what some of our sources mean when they say Alexander punished his father's murderers. Onto the funeral pyre also goes the dagger used to kill Philip, the harnesses of the getaway horses, which have also been killed in front of the crowd, and Philip's armour. Since in Macedonian law, a traitor's family would also pay the price of betrayal, Alexander has Pausanias' 3 sons executed, and he even kills the diviner who'd said the omens looked good for the wedding. Doth the lady protest too much? You might notice that I said 3 brothers were under suspicion, but that only 2 are put to death. This is because the 3rd brother, Alexander of Lyncestis, is initially let off by immediately declaring his devotion to Alexander, and even helping him to put his breastplate on to get to the royal palace for his official declaration as king. But his loyalty soon wears thin. Don't worry, it won't be long before his fate catches up with him. More on that in another episode. The next possible conspirator is Demosthenes. He's an Athenian orator who hates Philip's guts. You can still read the speeches he gave in the Athenian assembly in the 4th century BCE, and the hatred is palpable. By this point, he's been trying to get the Athenians to stand up to Philip for years. Did Demosthenes get tired of arguing and plan an assassination instead? Plutarch claims he had secret intelligence about Philip's death, suggesting he may have been involved, and that when the messengers came with news of Philip's death to Athens, at once the Athenians proceeded to make thank offerings for glad tidings and voted a crown for Pausanias. Wow, those oaths of loyalty they swore to Philip clearly weren't worth the papyrus they were written on. And Demosthenes came forth in public, dressed in splendid robe and wearing a garland on his head, although his daughter had died only 6 days before. The point is that according to the customs of the day, Demosthenes is supposed to be in public mourning for his daughter for an entire month. So, he sure is delighted that Philip is dead. But does that really implicate him in the murder? What do you think? Another conspirator who's often named is the recently crowned Persian king, Darius III. Perhaps he got wind of Philip's plan to invade Persia, so decided to take out the threat in a preemptive strike? A letter, supposedly written by Alexander to Darius later in his reign, says, "My father was killed by conspirators whom you instigated, as you have yourself boasted to in all your letters." Sometimes, the Persian king is said to have given Demosthenes gold to secure the assassination. He'll also be blamed later for sending gold to support plots against Alexander. Whether there's any truth in these accusations is unclear. Last but not least, there's a lot of suspicion around Alexander and his mother Olympias, and it's easy to see why. You only have to glance at the history of Macedonian royal succession to see that when a king dies a violent death, generally the person responsible is the next king. Did these two use Pausanias' anger against Philip to achieve their own ends? This is certainly Plutarch's story. When Pausanias slew Philip, most of the blame devolved upon Olympias, on the ground that she added her exhortations to the young man's anger and incited him to the deed. But a certain amount of accusation attached itself to Alexander also. Indeed, Plutarch tells us that there were rumours that when Pausanias approached him with his complaints about Philip, Alexander quoted a verse that encouraged the murder of 3 people: his father Philip, his new bride Cleopatra, and her guardian Attalus. Nasty. Justin too cast suspicion on Alexander and his mother. Hearing of the death of the king, Olympias then hastened to his funeral, supposedly out of respect for the dead. Yet, the same night in which she arrived, she put a gold crown on the head of Pausanias, who was still hanging publicly, an act which no one could have dared without the approval of the son of Philip. The suspicion is that Alexander and Olympias murdered Philip to secure Alexander's succession to the throne, which had been put in jeopardy by his recent marriage to the fully Macedonian Cleopatra. They're acting now before a fully Macedonian heir is born who could divide loyalties among the Macedonian elite. Let me know what you make of this theory on social media. Back in the royal palace at Aigai, the Macedonian army are gathered in a ceremonial hall. It's mere hours after Philip II's assassination, and his body is lying in state in the room with them, a stark reminder of the horrific events of the morning. But they can't wallow in their grief. They need to officially recognise a new king as soon as possible to prevent a power vacuum that could lead to infighting and civil war that could set Macedon back decades. As the afternoon sun hits the hall's grand stone pillars, Antipater, one of Philip's most trusted and senior statesmen, takes centre stage. Beside him is Alexander, dressed head to toe in full battle armour, clutching a ceremonial spear and standing tall. His appearance is one of a glimmering bronze superhero, with his royal status marked by a plume of dyed red horsehair atop his helmet and a short crimson cloak pinned to one shoulder. He certainly looks the part. "Hear me, men of Macedon," says Antipater. "Alexander, son of Philip of the royal Argead line, descended from Heracles and Achilles, is the legitimate heir of the kingdom of Macedon. Let us recognise him as king and make Macedonia great again!" As Antipater finishes his impassioned speech, the troops signal their acceptance by clashing their spear shafts against their shields and crying out, "Alexander!" This lawfully binds the Macedonian army to Alexander as Philip's legitimate successor. Senior General Clytus the Black strides forward to pledge his support with one hand on the hilt of his sword. "I swear my allegiance to you, King Alexander, as first among equals. I shall follow you as I followed your father, unto death."
"Oh, Clytus, be careful what you wish for."
He marks his completed oath with a short, sharp strike of sword on shield. Other generals follow suit until all are pledged to Alexander. So, the humans are decided, but what about the gods? Now the oaths have been made, everyone files out of the palace into the royal courtyard. They gather before a sacrificial altar where a priest is eagerly waiting and a fire scented with barley and incense is burning. A religious attendant leads forward a broad-shouldered, shining black bull whose horns are decorated with bands of cloth and flowers, marking it out as chosen for the gods. The bells around the bull's neck chime softly as it moves. The priest approaches in robes of pure white, signifying his ceremonial purity, and sprinkles water on the bull's head, causing the bull to nod. This means the bull has agreed to be sacrificed to the gods. O Zeus, accept this sacrificial offering and look with favour upon Alexander, son of Philip, whom the Macedonians have chosen, says the priest. Then, in one swift movement with a keenly sharpened knife, he slits the bull's throat. An attendant catches the bull's blood in a bowl and then pours it over the hissing altar fire. The crowd wait with bated breath. Will the gods approve of Alexander? The priest opens the bull's carcass and pulls out the entrails and liver. He inspects them carefully. They're smooth, unblemished, and plump. The signs are good, announces the priest. The gods accept Alexander. Alexander raises his spear to the heavens. Weapons strike shields. Voices rise. Alexander III is the new king of Macedon. Let the bloodbath commence. That's next time on Alexander the Great, Empire on Fire. If you'd like more Alexander content, follow Alexander the Great podcast on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, and sign up to Substack to get episode updates. You can also get my free download, The 5 Most Infamous Murders of Alexander the Great, now. Link in episode description. So too, if you'd like a guide that places everything you've just heard in context and makes sense of Alexander's life and reign, check out my Alexander the Great Ultimate Starter Pack, also linked in the description. Finally, if you want to get in touch, you can find me on alexanderthegreatpodcast@gmail.com. I'll always be happy to hear from you. See you next time.